This is Photoshop Classroom in a Book. We're on Lesson 2, Part 2. This is adjusting the color and tone starting on the top of page 40. We are going to work with the adjustment layers to try to adjust the color that we have in this image. It is an old dated photograph, and as it's sat, it has yellowed and the colors have come out kind of muddy. So we are going to try and do some color correction on this. We are going to be working with adjustment layers. We could do the same adjustments up here and have it directly working on the background layer. But once we make a change to the background layer, there is absolutely no going back. You have to go back and reopen the image to start with. That's why you always work on duplicate copies of an image. So we are working with the adjustment layers because they are not going to do any changes to the background. They are going to have those changes showing up in a separate layer. As you can see, we can actually, these are a mask, we can actually apply changes to a specific area of a photo if we don't want to do the entire photo. But what we're going to do is make adjustments that can be readjusted later. We can always go back in as long as we have an adjustment layer and we save the adjustment layer. We can go back in even after we've closed the image and reopened it. We can go back in and make an adjustment. Once you've flattened an image down and made the layers combined to the background, you can't separate them out again, and then you have to start basically over again. I'll show you what I mean as we work through this. These changes are always not permanent, I guess would be the best way to say it. So right now we want to specify a white point because the white point will change all the colors in the image. This is going to be what Photoshop will then define as pure white, and it will adjust all of the other colors according to what we select as a white point. So we're going to pick up the white point eyedropper. There is a black point, a mid-tone gray point, and a white point. And as we select that and find something that we determine is going to be white, now we may go too bright. If I select this bright spot on the back of the little kid's sailor suit, that's an awfully bright white. It's actually a little bit blown. And so you can see the adjustments that have been made here. If we select the back of the little girl's skirt, we aren't quite as bright. It might still be a little bit hot. The back of her shirt actually brings a little more color back in, and you can try different selections. Let's try the shoes that the boy's wearing, and you can see that's actually made the sky pretty much disappear. So you can try different selections to see if you can pick up a point that you feel is whiter. I'm going to try on her hip there, and I think I'm fairly close. The color changes depending on what point you select, and we could spend a lot of time going through trying different points. You can try as many as you'd like to try and get a better color, but this is just the beginning in trying to come up with better color. Now, if you do this for some images, just setting the white point might be enough to pull a color cast off. You could see how drastically we could change that by clicking different points. This is a good start. We're going to add now a levels adjustment layer. So all we need to do is find levels. There it is. And we're going to pick up our level adjustment layer. Now we've got the level histogram in the properties panel, and that is going to display the darks and lights, of course. We're learning a little bit more about working with levels and when we get later. If you've taken a photography class, I'm sure you've dealt with the levels in photography, and you may be familiar with that. But we are going to make some adjustments. You do need to know that the left triangle is the black point, just like we had the black point that we selected for the curves layer. There is a black point. We can set the black point here. We also have the same eyedroppers to pick up the black, gray, and white. What we have right now is a lack of heavy darks. We do have a few, but not very many. We want a little more dark coming up. And you can see on the histogram, it just barely gets started. And so we're going to drag our black point over a little bit. This is artificially darkening the image. Now, 18 is maybe a little dark. 15 may even be a hair on the dark side. But we've actually put some darker shadows in, and that's helped to give dimension to the image. We also want to adjust our midtones. And you can bring your midtones. You can see that the histogram is showing we have very little midtones going over here. We have a lot going towards the dark. We can lighten and darken our midtone values. If we drag the midtone values to the right, we're going to darken them. If we drag the midtone values to the left, we're going to lighten them a little bit. And since making our darks darker has actually added a little bit to what we've got, we are going to adjust our midtones just a bit. This is where our starting point was, or pretty close. We're going to actually darken our midpoints a little bit, not by a lot, but somewhere around 0.9, 0.93, 0.90 is what they give us in the book. I maybe would go not quite as dark. I'm going to go with 0.91. So we have made some adjustments to give a little bit more intense color. Now, as I said, we can turn this off and you can see what the image looked like to begin with. It had a very green-yellow cast to it. By setting the white point, we made some adjustments. If we want to look at this with just the levels adjusted, you can see what that looks like. But when you add the curves in there, the color brightens considerably. Now that we've adjusted the color, we're going to flatten the image to make it a little bit easier to work with touching it up. Now this merges all the layers. If you were going to work on this file later and you want to make some other adjustments to it, you might take this file and save it as it is so you can go back in and make a change. As it is right now, I could go back into my curves. I can pick my white point back up again, and maybe I want to experiment a little bit more with making changes to this image. Again, you can see the changes that we're making. That really brings that and bleaches that out. And so you can see that I have been able to go back in and make other adjustments. Once I flatten this, I will not be able to do this. So I'm going to go to Layer and Flatten, and this is going to bring those two layers back down to the background layer. We don't have that ability to go back and make changes to that any longer. Now we can go back up in history and we could go back to before I flattened the image, but anything that I do from here on out, if I wanted to keep those changes, I wouldn't be able to go back to having the multiple layers again. There's a good section on page 42 about photo restoration. You might take some time to read that over, and there is a lot of work that is done in Photoshop with repairing damaged or old photographs. It can be a time-consuming art, but it is very nice to be able to have the ability to do restoration work. The next thing we're doing on page 44 is we're going to use the spot healing brush tool. We want to get that crease out of the photo. Let me zoom that in just a little bit so we can get a better look at that. And you can see how this runs down the middle. The spot healing brush tool will remove blemishes and other imperfections. It samples the pixels around the retouched area. It matches the texture, it matches the lighting, the transparency, and shading. It samples those pixels and it applies that to the area that you're working with. So what we're going to do next is pick up the spot healing brush tool. And we'll find that right here. It kind of looks like well, I've got my patch tool up, but the spot healing brush has a little band-aid with an area select next to it. We want to go for a little bit larger brush than what I have open right now. We want to have a 100% hardness brush, which actually puts a hard edge on the brush. And we want something a little bit larger, about 25 pixels, so that we can select both sides of the damaged area. You want to make sure that you have content aware selected, because that is going to sample the image around it. So we're going to take the spot healing brush and drag it down, just click and drag from the top of the crease. And as you drag down, you can see that you get that nice gray line. Now here I missed a little piece. Let me zoom in a little bit more so I can actually see this. There we go. And that cleaned it up. You can actually go in and clean up any of the spots that are in the sky that don't look like they belong. And any place that you miss, we can come in and we want to get all of the sky. Now let's see, let's go through here. And it does a pretty fair job of reading and estimating. Now the bridge isn't quite perfect. If you saw that, it's not exactly a perfect angle on the bridge, but it still looks better than what we had. We can work from the bottom of the picture as well, or you can work down to the bottom, but we can just look and drag and see, and it matches everything pretty well. It does a fairly good job of filling in. Oops. Now, is it perfect? No, not necessarily. Some areas it's going to look better than others, but it does a pretty good job of guessing what the area is supposed to look like. This might come out a little bit odd. Do you see how that kind of filled that in? It didn't quite make it perfect. We're going to keep going here. And that filled in rather well. And so does this. But there's quite an area there that you can look at. Now we're going to also go up in this corner. You can see there's a scratch or a white hairline through there, and drawing over that makes that disappear. Any other dark areas or anything, any other spots that you'd like to clean? Well, this looks a little odd up here, and I missed a spot right there. We can go in and we can clean these areas up. They look like they were dirt. And when we come back, we'll continue with using the content aware patch